a live stream. So if you have gotten here, there are some pieces of information that we have available here. Tomorrow, for those that are on the live stream, we'll have this information posted on the district website under committees and under the start time committee, particularly under there. So we have a short agenda this evening, but it'll probably take us an hour to get through or more. So the first items are start time survey results presentation, which will be Ms. Pimentel, our assistant to the superintendent and CIO. Then we'll do a recap of where we were from last year, just in case any of you missed all the fun that we had for 10 months last year. A proposal from this committee to consider, and then the costs associated with that proposal. Now, just for everyone's edification, the proposal from this subcommittee then goes to, handouts over there, goes to the governing committee next week, on December 7th. They're meeting back in this room at 7 o'clock. The committee itself will be here present in the room. You're welcome to watch live stream if you're interested in what their outcome with this, what they're going to review. The following week, there'll be a presentation to the Board of Education about the entire strategic planning initiative one more time, and this will be one of the key components in the last part of the presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Pimentel, who will go over the three packets on this survey.
Hello, everyone. So we have three packets that you should have gotten over at the table. One is for the parent start time, student start time, and then the staff start time survey. So I'm just going to start with the parent start time survey just to explain what's in the report, and then I'll go through the other two, and then we'll give you some time to kind of look through the data on your own. So the parent start time survey, if you didn't have the opportunity to take it, we broke it out into two sections. The first section was the household data. So we were asking parents to answer those questions about their household, such as how many children are in the, or how many students are in the household, employment status, departure time and arrival time for the last parent guardian and the first, because we were trying to see availability of parents in the morning and the afternoon. Child care, what that looks like. And then the next section was the student questions. So parents rotated through these questions for as many children as they said that they had. So if they had three, they answered these questions 3 times so that we can capture what this looks like for elementary, junior high, and high school. So all of the data on the student questions is disaggregated by each of those levels, elementary, junior high, and high school. And this is looking at how many students were represented in the survey, what the commutes look like to school, how they get to school, student wake times, student sleep times, and this is all from the parent perspective. We added in a not sure, but every parent pretty much said they knew. Before school activities, what our kids are involved in before school, what time they start those activities. After school activities, dinner time, and then sleep habits. We added that in the end. This was a needs assessment survey to see how our students spend their time before and after school. And we added in the sleep habits because we were curious what strategies they're currently practicing, and then which ones they're interested in learning more about, so we can use that for programming and also for Parent University. So you can look through that in a minute, but I just wanted to go through real quick the student start time survey. So it's just the student questions from the parent survey that we repeated in here. And when you look through it, the yellow bars represent the parent's response, and then the green bars is the student's response side by side for each of the levels. And we broke everything down by junior high and high school. We only gave the survey to students in grades 7 through 12. So it's the exact same questions that we asked the students, and you can see those results broken down. And then the last one is the staff start time survey. Those questions are a little bit different just because they're addressed to staff, but you can go through those questions and look at how the staff responded to how they spend their time outside of the school day. So we'll give you a few minutes to kind of go through that and digest some of that.
And feel free, if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer whatever we can based upon the results of this. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts? Anything they gleaned from the results?
Was there a survey question that asked total sleep time, or just the sleep time going to
No.
bed and sleep time waking up?
No.
Okay.
If you're watching the news in the past couple of days, this topic is getting a lot more press on a couple of news stations, particularly about the use of melatonin for children and the effects of that. So there's a couple of news stations running some reports on that information. So, which some of the data they're getting from comes from some of the experts that we've involved in this process as well. All right, so without any further questions, we're going to just move on a little bit here. If you do, and if you're online and you're watching this, when you see the information, if you do have any questions, please feel free to email myself or Ms. Pimentel. I'll be happy to try to answer anything that we get from the community with regard to the results of this. Again, this was a needs survey done to the community to see where the needs of the community currently are. It's certainly a very, as we've talked about, a very diverse community. We have a number of households in the community where we have a single parent, or we have both parents working. So we have some conditions that are unique to a lot of districts, and we have some interesting factors as we move forward with this to consider as we look to see what we may do in the future. So if you have any questions at any point in time, feel free to ask any of us. I'll be trying to happily answer anything we can. All right, we're going to move on to the presentation that we have on the screen above. So from last May, which was our last meeting, I think we had some about 15 people that arrived for that meeting, talked about some recommendations for the start time subcommittee. Two of the major factors were to look at the start of the high school later and still maintain extra help in club time. If you're not familiar with the current high school schedule, we end around 1:46. We have an extra help period and a club period after school prior to sports beginning from 1:46 till 3 o'clock. So it's basically broken in half, and we have two separate periods there. There was also a piece that was brought up about why can't we just flip the elementary and secondary schedules, just put the elementary kids going earlier and the secondary kids going later. So we're going to try to address some of that as well. We did this last year, but we'll go on. What some of the limits that we're facing. So we're under an area called Section 11 for sports in our region. Now, because Ward Melville High School is a large school, we don't just compete with the schools that are adjacent to us. We compete with schools that are across the island and in our region. So we could be going as far away as William Floyd or Pat Med. Some of those trips, some of those bus rides sometimes take up to 45 minutes for our students going to those competitions. So in order to be able to get to some of those games and even with some of the practices, the latest we can start some of the sports at this point in time is 3 o'clock. Mr. Finnerty, who couldn't be here this evening, had something for his own family. Our athletic director, he came to one of the meetings last year and talked about the limitations with regard to this. And it's just because of our size and who we compete against and some of the sports. But it's on any given day, we could have students going as far east as Riverhead, going into Smithtown, Comac, Northport. So and with traffic on Long Island, it isn't getting any easier getting kids back and forth. The other factor, which we keep reiterating because a lot of families are not aware of it, is this limitation of hours by the State Education Department, 990 hours of instruction at the secondary level. It's 900 at the elementary level. Lunch periods don't count in that. Passing time doesn't count in that. So our current high school day covers 6 hours and 41 minutes, which, given those other limitations throughout the course of the year, and even when we do midterms and Regents exams, those hours are also limited. So we can't count necessarily all the hours in those days towards the 990 hours. So that is another limiting factor. We must meet that. We exceed that right now, not by a lot, by about 100 hours over, which is good, because if we needed to take any days for weather, we didn't have to take one last year. Obviously, we didn't have to take one tonight because of whatever prediction of snow they had out there. It could be a factor where we had back about 12 years ago where we had Sandy and Nemo hit in the same year, and we lost vacations and things of that nature because we have to make up the time. The flipping the elementary, we went through this last year, again, not possible, again, because of the mandated hours with the state, and the sports as well, which limits us. The cost of the additional buses to run programs simultaneously also is a limiting factor. So we did have a less tiered structure many, many years ago, as many school districts did. Schools actually had, or on typical start times similar to each other. But over the course of years, it was broken out to a multi-tiered system, which saved money. To go back to the other system is going to cost money to do it. So it's just something we need to be aware of because of how many buses we may need. So we're going to go through a little bit of that as we go through the proposal component of this. So this was an alternate 8 that we looked at from the survey committee that met last week. 2 weeks ago, I'm sorry, and considering some of the things. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Carlson to address how some of this looks.
So what we did in this alternate schedule, we put the Wood Melville High School 35 minutes later, and the junior highs as well. In order to make this work, this schedule work most efficiently, we would have to keep one elementary school, and we just labeled it elementary A. We're not saying which elementary school. That would have to, we'd have to figure out which school logistically would work best to be the early school, and which ones would be the 4 late schools. So we would need 4 that are this time that's up there now for the late schools up here, 9:25 to 3:40, is what Arrowhead, Mountain, Setauket are right now. And one of our goals from the start was we didn't want them to be any later than they already are. There are a lot of people who would prefer them to be earlier than they are. But without making them any later, the earliest then that we could do the high school would be the latest we could do the high school is 7:40. So it's 35 minutes later than now, so it's pretty good. May not be what everybody in the room was hoping for from the start. This was the best way we could come up with that doesn't cost a tremendous amount of money. And of course, tremendous is everyone has their own definition of what that would mean. So in this case, in order to put this schedule in place, if we were to do this, let's say next school year, with the grade configuration that we have now, meaning 6th graders at the elementary school, 9th graders at the junior highs, we would need to add 8 large buses and 4 minibuses in order to make the schedule work. That cost in the current year's dollars would be just under $1.3 million. And I say current years because we don't know what next year's bus rates are going to be, because that's the increase is based on the Consumer Price Index, which we won't know until May, as determined by the State Education Department. So it will be somewhat more than that if we were to do this next year. Something, a couple of percent, depending on what CPI is, come May, more than that $1.3 million. It's just under $1.3 million. If we were to wait to do this until 9th grade goes to the high school and 6th grade goes to the Jolinas and Murphy, we could get by with 2 fewer, not from now, from this proposal, 2 fewer large buses, meaning 6 more buses than we have now. And instead of 4 minibuses additional, 3 minibuses additional. So that cost, again, in the current years, using the current year's rates, would be $963,000 to do that. So it's about a $321,000 difference if, again, using the current year's rates, if we wait until the grade reconfiguration has changed. So that's something that we would ask everybody to keep in mind in deciding on what your collectively recommendation would be.
So just with that, Mr. Carlson, with the numbers itself, when looking at the budget, to get to this with the 2% tax cap, what does that mean?
Well, so that means basically, so to add whatever it is, whether it's 500,000, a million, a million and a half, or in this case, just under a million three for next year. Actually, it'd be a little over a million three because we have the, whatever the couple of percent increase on that would be. With the tax cap, it just means something else has to come out to make room for it. Simple as that. We can't just say, well, but this is something different. We want to add it in. The tax cap doesn't care about that. It just means something else has to come out. Something else has to make room for this. Probably a lot of you, if not all of you, have heard me talk about capital projects and that kind of thing. That's something that has nothing to do with this. Capital projects are outside the tax cap, so when I say that kind of stuff, that's a whole different story. This is operational. It is subject to the limits of the tax cap. So there's no simpler way to put it than to add that much money into the budget for transportation means something is going to have to come out to make room for it. There's not, no, I mean, theoretically, there could be a large state aid increase. I doubt it. The tax cap itself is not going to be more than what they call the growth factor, 2%. That doesn't mean our cap is exactly 2%. It could be a little higher, a little lower, but it's not going to be much higher than that, if any. So that's something to keep in mind too. If this goes in, something else comes out, and then that's something that we would bring to the Budget Advisory Committee, which starts meeting on December 12th, and that would be, if we're going to do something with this, for the Budget Advisory Committee to make recommendations to the board as to, well, what comes out then to make room for it.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Carlson about that, with the budget process and what the numbers mean? Yes.
It's about $13 million. 230 million.
There are some lobbying groups from superintendents associations and some other organizations out there, NICE as well has been very involved with this, that are asking the state education department, which is really not their call, it's really the legislature that has to do this, to pull things like transportation and security outside the cap because of the nature of some of the things that are going on. As you've heard me say in the past, there is a move that by 2027, all the bus companies and all the school districts that own buses have to start electrifying their fleets. They're not going to be allowed to buy new buses unless they have electric components to them. If by 2035, there'll be no more buses, according to the mandate, that'll be powered by diesel fuel. Although the little known secret for all that is the large buses right now that they have that are electrified have a small diesel generator on them because in the Northeast, we have this little thing called cold, and the electric buses can't produce enough heat in time to start picking up kids, so they have to have a small generator on them anyway. So just one of those things that you'll find out as you start digging into some of this stuff.
And the diesel generator on the electric buses is also needed to keep the batteries warm.
Sorry.
Or in the summertime to keep the batteries cool.
Cool. Yeah, so just something to be aware of, and all that, those expenses of those type of electric buses right now, according to this year's numbers, are about 4 times the price of a current diesel-operated bus.
It's a little bit in left field to some degree, but if we decided to move towards getting buses back in the district, our own in-house buses,
Ooh.
would that be capital projects, or is that still under regular expenditures?
Well, some of both. The purchase of the buses, the garage, all the facilities, we're going to need charging stations, all of that kind of stuff would be capital. Hiring all the drivers, all of that kind of stuff, that's operational. I don't think that would save us any money in the long run. If for no other reason, then it comes that the more employees we have, the more legacy costs we have. Meaning, if they get health insurance and they get health insurance retirement, that kind of thing. And the bus companies, while they have their own unions, they don't have the same things like that state retirement system that are mandated as we do.
So, just to draw your attention, we gave out a sheet over there, the current schedule and then the alternate schedule, just to give you a sense of what that would look like.
Hi, I
Yes.
have a question. For the pricing, if we wait until we do reach the strategic plan, if we end up doing that, so it's 963,000, but we will be saving money on not transporting the ninth graders to the high school. So what is the net? So we're really not gonna be spending $900,000 on transportation, it'll be less, because we're not using those buses to transport.
That's part of why it costs less.
He
That's
he
part of
factored that in.
why instead of needing 8 buses, we only need 6 buses.
Okay. Oh, so that's just not because of different routes, because the kids are in different areas, you're including that in that?
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
Sorry, since we're talking about cost, I just want to bring a little bit of perspective with the numbers from the survey. So, according to the survey, our elementary students get 10 hours of sleep, with a recommended number of hours of sleep of about 10. So they are getting enough sleep. Our secondary students, with a recommended 9.5 hours of sleep, they're getting 6.5 hours of sleep. And so they are basically missing roughly 3 hours of sleep, which puts them, according to medical data, at enormous risk for a lot of mental issues, tardiness, school absences, reduced learning, et cetera, et cetera. And the athletes with 6 hours of sleep have 3 times the injuries of student athletes with 8 hours of sleep per night. So, and the other number that I would like to bring into perspective is with a start time, a high school start time of 7:40 a.m., we are not exceptional. We are just back into the norm, which is the point from which other districts are trying now to move away, because the recommended start times are around 8:30 a.m. So this would be a compromise, and I totally understand the costs, but I just want to bring a little bit of perspective of where we are with the numbers.
Those are both excellent points. So we are one of the earliest starting schools in the state. There's 6 schools that are as early as we are. One is actually earlier, 6:45 a.m. That's upstate New York. So there's a lot to be considered with that. You're exactly right. The 7:40 puts us in the range of schools. It's really between like 7:25 and 7:55. Ideally, as we've had discussions in some of our subcommittees as well, ideally 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock start time would be much better. There is also some movement with NYSBA, with the state, that's the New York State School Boards Association, about looking at start times being universal throughout the state. Don't know if that's going to get any traction. We watch that very carefully. California has instituted that. They're having a number of issues with that in the process. So things that we all have to consider. The only thing that whenever we decide, if we decide to make a change such as this, it is very important that that decision, when we look at our next little slide here, is done sooner than later, because January for a lot of parents, if they have younger children coming on board, is when those daycare centers start lining up for those fees. So in order to get people to have that availability, and it's not just for our own parent group, it's also for our administration, faculty, staff who may live in other districts who have children in those locations, to give them enough time to plan. So we're at a critical cusp right now of when we make this move. If we do it, we have to think about getting this done at the latest by January, so people can be prepared and we can get the information out there, and then they can start to plan for the following school year for whatever their needs may be. So that, based upon some of the survey results, you can read some of the comments, and some of them are very humorous, some of the comments, particularly ones from the kids, and others were, leave it alone, or, I really like to get more sleep, but I stay up too late, and type of things. So we are seeing that this lovely device that some people have with us has also caused some issues. Ms. Rubenstruck is not here with us tonight, but Mr. Young is. We can tell you that we know for a fact with our Google Chromebooks that our students are up very late using those devices. Even though the cell phones may be away, the Chromebooks are still active, and we can actually show that data of how many kids are using those devices at all different age levels in our school, way beyond some of the indicated bedtimes that were on the list here. So it could be hit and miss sometimes, but we've also found that some adults are using some of our devices at wee hours of the morning for different purposes, but that's a whole other story. Dr.
So
McKinnon.
just, so following up on, from what Barbara said, so the weekday sleep times for the high school kids are 6.5 hours, but the weekend sleep times are modal, because there's a big range, but modal are 10 hours. So that by itself is pretty clear indication that they're somewhat sleep deprived, that they're recovering on the weekends. So, I mean, internally the data says for our actual students that they are sleep deprived during the week.
And also the fact that they are sleeping longer during the weekend is actually evidence. The evidence already exists in the literature, but we always hear people say, oh yeah, you know, if we move start time later, they'll sleep later and they will, you know, not sleep longer. It's not true. They probably will go to sleep a little later, but overall they will sleep longer because they will wake up so much later. And we have the proof now in our numbers here in Three Village during the weekends.
Okay.
Can I just ask a question about the 6th and 9th grade moving piece? Because will there be other costs associated with that that are not included in this?
Yes, so that's what the governing committee will look at next week as well before we bring it to the board the week after. So we looked at costs for what we might need to do at the high school. Nothing really needs to be done at the junior high schools, but the high school does need some reconfiguration of spaces. However, those reconfigured spaces, whatever we need to do, is covered in the capital budget, which the capital is outside of the cap.
Okay.
So, and we were planning to increase that line anyway. At one point before the budget was voted down a few years ago, we had about $6 million.
$6.6 million.
In that line. So this year we had 1.4 million set aside, and we were planning to do a number of different things. And then the roof a little bit caved in at Setauket, so there went most of that money, and then some from reserves to try to get that roof repaired. So that's a risk that could happen in any given year. You know, it's sort of like owning your home. You don't know whether the hot water heater is going to go one day, or you know, your roof is going to go away, or your car is going to break down. You always have to be prepared for some of those things. So getting that built back up to a point where we could handle any type of issues like that. The major expense was thought to be a biolab, but we currently have a room in the building that is an actual biolab. If we had to reconstruct the biolab, that would have put a very big dent in that proposal. But we have the ability to do this within a reasonable fashion. So it would cost us probably under $2 million to get the whole thing squared away.
And that's building.
And it's
the
aidable.
building itself, but staffing and that kind of thing, I think that was part of your question too.
In general, yeah.
Yes. It's about another 600,000 if we go with the full proposal. The junior high schools would need language teachers for the 6th grade coming up.
Right.
Currently, the 6th grade doesn't have languages. So we estimate anywhere from 3.2 to 3.6. Again, our numbers can fluctuate based on whatever the choices of the languages for some of those students might be. Majority of our students, I believe, we have a couple of our guidance counselors here, and Ms. Connolly usually picks Spanish, but we offer Italian and French as well. So those are possibilities. And then for the high school, with a full class going up, we would probably look at the big expense for staffing would be adding guidance counselors to handle that entire grade level. So we want to be able to make sure the mental health supports are in place if that were to occur. So, and that would obviously, we'd have to reconfigure some office space over in the guidance office to accommodate that. So, but we'll cover that at the governing committee next week, which you're coming to.
Yes, and I was making that point simply because I'm perfectly fine with these numbers in both instances because I think this is a worthwhile thing.
Right.
But as a committee, we might want to make sure that are we comfortable with that larger number, which I personally am,
Right.
because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. We may have another roof collapse and suddenly
Yeah.
then we're like, oh,
Yeah.
well, we can't do this full movement, you know, and I think the community would buy into this at either number personally, but that's me.
And that's why also we're at the simultaneous to the BAC going on right now. We also have a bond committee that we've put forward as well to try to start to look at that for possibility next year. It's been about 10 years roughly since the last bond has gone through. And just like your home, there's definitely things that need to be fixed here. We did every summer, and in January we repeat it, the administration, we walk every building from attic to basement to see what's going on. Give you a sense of every one of the cupolas, while beautiful parts of our buildings, they're all falling apart. Murphy's literally is falling off the building right now, and what was targeted to be fixed this year until Setauget's roof caved in. So the priority had to be to the emergency piece on that one. In the basement, which is not something that the average person sees, we have valves that are rusted through. The major part of that is if we don't have heat on a day like today, we can't send students to that school. We'd have to send them to another school. So those are the non-flashy things that people don't see that need to be taken care of, because the newest building in the district is from 1972, and that's the high school. So their buildings are showing their age. These type of things need to be addressed. And then there's some other things that we're going to look at with the bond committee that could be possibilities of issues and things to handle for the future. But that, again, if you're interested in that, we've put out the call for people to apply for that. The board will be doing selections for that committee as well, and then we'll proceed forward with that. It's going to be a smaller group, just because that group will be meeting at different schools and then walking the locations. So we can't have 50 people on the committee trying to traipse into the boiler room and then to the attic and everywhere. So, but we were welcome to be part of that if you're interested. So you could just send those applications to the board, address that what was put forward. Any other thoughts about this? Jim?
Yes, I just wanted to talk about a different perspective. I'm a classroom teacher up at the high school and a classroom teacher that does a lot of extra help. I teach a challenging subject area. And right now, one thing that I have to say, without talking about, being sleep deprived or anything like that, is the current situation is really beneficial for a lot of our students that participate in sports and also clubs and still need to find time to come to extra help. It's very easy for me now to make a phone call home and say, listen, there's an hour essentially between when the bell ends, that they have a chance to grab their books, get what they need, come to extra help, and still get to sports practice on time, still go to their clubs, drama, whatever they're involved in. Losing 35 minutes of that, and that I'm assuming means like at 2:21 the bell rings, I'm not exactly going to have kids running into my classroom for extra help. So that's really limiting if they're a sports team player. And if you look at the after-school activities, almost 50% of our kids are registering some kind of sports team or whatnot. That's really limiting the ability for me to service kids that may need academic support after school. And also then I'm also competing against the other 61% that were showing that they want to go to clubs and things like that. So there is definitely a cost to to me, the academic nature of this, because the sports still start at 3 o'clock. And there's only so many hours in the day to try to get things done. That's one thing I just wanted to bring attention to, because the current schedule does work quite nicely for that.
Except they have to get up at 5:30. So I don't know.
You got to talk into the mic so they
Yeah,
can.
so in other
No, I mean, the thing that they have to get at 5:30, if you look at this, I think it's like over 50%. That's like inhumane. I mean, it's a bit.
yeah,
There is factor that, when
Just turn on the microphone and move it towards.
And I appreciate that you consider, for the students, thank you for that. But I think, just observe my own children and other friends' children, the people I know, when kids are deprived of sleep, they don't concentrate well. They cannot focus. The first 2 period is like still in the mode of sleeping. And they told me themselves, so they really realized that. I think that may also factor into that they may need extra time to sleep. One of our daughter, she has to restudy again. So that's a time that maybe can be saved by sleeping well. Then they can concentrate better in class, then maybe need less of the, help time. So it's hard to argue without data. I just hope if we go forward with the change, that later we can have a survey and see if data can show the proof that the sleep time helps the academic.
So I just wanted to use, and this is for numbers for the governing committee to keep into account. And one section of the survey gave information on the homework. And so we have a situation where an average high school student reports 1 to 2 hours of homework. 43% report 3 or more hours of homework per night. And so they basically wake up at 5:30 a.m., they go to school, return home on average at 5 p.m., and they have 3 hours of homework, and they can only sleep 5.5 to 6 hours of sleep. So in this situation, you can imagine that they're not functioning properly. It's very hard for them, and then plus they have intense activities such as sports and other clubs that are really labor intensive. So I would say probably in other districts that have moved the start time, it's been shown that the time of the extra help has been reduced, and in addition to having improvements in academics and even extracurricular activities, because they get more sleep and they're more efficient. I don't know if we change when we can collect the numbers and see what effect it has, but this is sort of common sense, I would say.
So getting back to your point, I mean, the time that has to be optimized here is class time. If the kids are coming into first and second period asleep, or half asleep, we're not really optimizing class time. I mean, that's the most valuable time. That's the time where all the money is going in terms of salaries. We should be optimizing that. And the later school starts, the better we optimize that time. And I don't think there's any way around that. That's just how the physiology works.
Well, just to say that doesn't mean that I have kids that are in my 8th and 9th period class that don't come to extra help. I mean, my whole first period doesn't just show up to extra help. In 8th and 9th period, nobody shows from extra help.
No,
I
I
mean,
didn't say
kids
that.
equally
I
need.
said, I mean,
Well, you were
that's
saying
not,
that.
that's not what I
because-
said at all. It's very clear that the kids are not concentrating as well. And in fact, you say that you have data on that showing that they don't do as well.
Well, we have data that shows that 10% of the high school does not come in for first period. That's what we have to show.
But also you said there are data according to which there's a higher grades, 12% higher grades in later periods for
class.
the same class.
That's correct.
Do you understand what we're saying?
Well, my argument was about having extra help, because there are kids that need additional support.
But what needs to be optimized here? Obviously, the teaching time.
We can't all start at, somebody has to have first period. And we're
Yes,
changing
but putting that
35
back
minutes of the
later
day.
makes it work better.
Essentially now first period is second period, so you still said that that would be a challenging period. I'm just saying, if you don't want me to do extra help, that's I think a shame.
No
for the
one's
district.
saying that. No one's saying that or implying it.
Well, there's only so many hours between when the school day would end and when sports would begin.
Well, there's always trade-offs. In everything, there's trade-offs.
That's true.
I mean, what you should really be lobbying for is to move the sports later.
Well, that's not I'm not section 11.
Unfortunately, that's not in his purview.
So
It's not
I
even
really
our
can't
purview.
continue that
We could
discussion.
try to do that. Again, we've gone down this road a few times about, we should tell Section 11 that they need to move. We've exhausted that. I've been back in this district for 12 years, and having been in another county, the athletic associations are not moving the times. So that their thing is, then you need to look at your start of school. And they've argued that, whether it's Section 11 or Nassau County's sections or Western Suffolk sections. So part of the thing that may help us, as Ms. Ruffley pointed out, when the 9th grade moved to the high school, we would see some alleviation of that, because right now we're waiting around sometimes for 9th graders to get over from the junior high schools for buses to come over and drop them off. So, and then having, as Ms. Casella could tell you, wherever we're playing on a given day, how many buses are gonna go out and where they're going. If it's home games, great. If it's an away game, we could have kids coming home sometimes very late into the early evening hours. So right now, this time of year, it's getting dark around 4:30, 5 o'clock. So we're not going on some fields that are lit in some locations. So we want to be careful of that too. Yes? Ms. Nancy?
What do the districts in Nassau County that start at 8:15 and 8:30, 9 o'clock, what do they do with sports? How do they, I know it's not Section 11, it's Section 9.
9.
What is their, I
No,
just,
Section 8 is,
I'm
Nassau.
curious
8.
of what their, because I'm noticing as someone involved with the sports teams, all of the sports teams, and as a coach and now a mental health coach for athletes, you know, I'm curious about if we can move that. You know, a lot of these games are not starting until 5 p.m., some of them 6 p.m.
Right.
Kids are, my own children are, I don't want to say stuck, but they have to stay at the high school until 4 o'clock, until that bus leaves at 4:15, 5 o'clock, and there's not a lot they can do in that time, and it's very idle time, and honestly, it takes a very self-directed and self-motivated kid to go to the library and just, you know, crank out 4 hours of homework.
True.
As much as my son wants downtime too, and I'm like, well, you can get work done, and I've been having a lot of conversations with the kids about this. This is a very, very important topic, and I have 4 children of my own in this district, and they're all athletes and involved in clubs, and I'm constantly asking them, their friends, like, and they're like, we're exhausted all the time. The teams I meet with, we're exhausted all the time. They tell me this time and time again, and it's not just one team, it's all the teams. And I ask them, like, what can we do? What can we do to help you? And, you know, and I always say, oh, you're just gonna go to bed later if you can get up later. And they're like, sometimes, but we have an option. Like, we can get more sleep. I'm seeing the injuries, like you're saying. I'm seeing the mental exhaustion impact their decision-making, impact their health, their choices. Listen, I know when I don't get enough sleep, I don't make great choices the next day. I don't eat the best foods. I'm just tired, and when we're tired, we're not at our best. And I think that's what a lot of this committee is trying to pinpoint. And I see it in the kids, and I'm really having, like, you know, after school they have from 1:46 until 3 o'clock.
Right.
And I ask them, and I hear what Mr. Dornicek is saying about the extra help. Do they need an hour and a half for extra help? Do they need an hour and 15 minutes? Can they do it in 20 minutes? Can they do it and still, can we say to the club advisors and the coaches, Johnny's gonna be late to practice today. He has extra help. That has to be okay. We have to make it okay for the club advisors and coaches to be receiving the students if they are late. It's 15 minutes, it's 20 minutes. How many times in a season? A season is 2 months, 3 months. That's it. How many kids play multiple sports? I don't have the data in front of me, but maybe it's not everyone. So a season is September and October, and then the rest of the year they can go to their clubs, they can go to extra help, they can attend those at will. But I think we can do better communication amongst coaches, athletic directors, advisors. Everyone can say, let Johnny come to practice late. It's okay if he misses 20 minutes of the club. This is just my.
So Ms. Jansen is,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
she's a guidance counselor at the high school, but she's also the, yeah, she did a great job.
Sorry,
She also does the, works with the athletic team. She's an athletic counselor, so she meets with a lot of the teams as groups and does a lot of the counseling for them.
I do a
So she
lot.
brings a very unique perspective to this. So to start with the original question you began with,
Sorry.
having been a former principal in Nassau County from 2005 to 2012, you have to remember Nassau County is, if you took Nassau County, Suffolk County is 2.5 times larger than Nassau County in square footage, just an area. So not that we're sending kids to Montauk Point to play games, but we go out pretty far, with Floyd being one of them and Pat and Ed. The proximity of the districts helps a great deal. The districts, many of them are smaller than us, with the exceptions of like Great Neck and Syosset and those larger districts. They're much smaller. You know, where I came from, the district I was in was only 3,500 students. The high school had 1,100 at its maximum at one point in time, with 4 grade levels in it. And then what's always brought up, and it's been brought up since we were just saying before we started the meeting, we began this journey last year in October. It was our first meetings. So it's been over a year now that we've been talking about this. We're constantly bringing up Jericho, which is a great district. And some folks have said, well, why is Jericho starting at 9 o'clock? Well, Jericho does its extra help before school starts.
Yeah.
So that's why it starts that way. Jericho's high school and middle school, although not open yesterday or today because they had a flood in their electric rooms down in their basements, yes, so they're closed. They're on the same campus. The buildings are attached. They share some spaces. So the middle school goes in early. Their first period is when the high school is doing their club period and their extra help period. As Jim pointed out, not every club meets every day. But teachers offer extra help. The vast majority of the teachers offer extra help practically every day, you know, even Fridays. You know, I've been at the high school where teachers have had extra help on Fridays, and kids are attending. I've passed by Mr. Dornicek's rooms on occasion, then he has kids in his room
He's
on
busy.
Friday afternoon. So that's an inspirational teacher right there. They're coming on a Friday. And yes, you're right. In circumstances where the time is later, and if you look at this lovely chart here, we were later at one point in time in this district. This is not something new to us. We were a little later. Having been a teacher at Ward Melville High School years ago, if you were doing extra help, you wrote passes to kids to go to, whether it was practice, typically if it was an away game, you weren't trying to hold them up, and most teachers gave accommodations to do things. Having that earlier time, you might be able to have teachers that are in by 7, that some teachers may do extra help before the start of the school day. It's a possibility. Not saying that's ideal. We don't want them to get up any earlier, obviously, but some teachers could offer it that way. We did years ago when I was at the high school.
And they do that in the elementary schools.
They do it in
do
the
that
elementary schools, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we don't have a 0 period. When I was a high school principal, we had a later start time. We switched it. It was an earlier start time. We went later. We had a 0 period. We haven't had the ability to do a 0 period. 0 period, if we did it now with the way the high school is, would be at 6:25 in the morning. That would be crazy. So, so that we could do a 0 period for those students that are affected. Years ago, we used to do that, particularly in phys ed, for students that didn't want to dress or undress in front of the other students. That was in place. We're talking over 20 years ago, but those were in place. So it's difficult to compare Suffolk County, where we are, and our size, compared to Nassau County and its size and the proximity of some of the districts. We're 22 square miles in this district alone. And we're a good-sized district, but take a Longwood or Brentwood, and Brentwood has almost 19,000 students in it. Sachem, is 4 times the size of Brentwood in area, but with about 2,000 less kids. But it's an enormous district. Longwood, if Pine Barrens didn't exist in the middle of it, Longwood would be bigger than Sachem. So, we're talking about large expanses of land to transverse. Ms. Conley?
If we are going to discuss a 0 period or extra help or clubs in the morning, I would want to make sure that we're also discussing equitable access for all students, because even at the elementary level, for their co-curricular or extra help sessions, parents have to drive kids, and we would want to make sure that the opportunity is available for all kids to participate.
Absolutely.
So if I understand what you're saying correctly, you're saying there should be more flexibility on the part of the sports. Yes, I agree with you 100%.
I think there could be. I think there could be conversations that
Yes,
could.
okay, let's have a conversation.
I'm not speaking for Mr. Finity, but I believe that, listen, coaches are amazing people that spend a lot of time with our kids, and they have a
I'm not
giant
suggesting
impact.
otherwise.
And they would be more than happy to help the kids. It's the students are more afraid to miss practice than the coaches are afraid of them missing practice. The coaches are like, fine, go ahead, do what you have to do. But the kids are always so nervous. I can't miss practice. I can't be late. So I worry about that as
So
a
to follow
fallout.
up with the second thing you said was the kids are overscheduled. I think that's a broad concern throughout the district. A lot of parents feel that.
Not the country.
And
Yeah.
then the third thing you bring up is homework, and I feel like there hasn't been a discussion on flexibility of homework with ChatGPT, with Google, with all these sites that you can just copy homework from. A lot of homework has just turned into transcription, empty transcription. And I think that is part of the discussion that's not coming up here, that we need to talk about flexibility on sports, but we also need to talk a bit about flexibility on homework as well.
Well, that's a broader conversation, obviously, the
Yes,
homework.
but-
I agree with you, and what I thought about for student athletes was a better way to communicate to teachers. And I send out a lot of surveys to my student athletes, because I want to know from them, what do you need from me? How can I support you? How can I communicate with the adults in your life to give you more support? And I had asked them this question: would you like your teachers to know more about what you're doing after school? I don't know if all the teachers, I don't want to speak for Mr. Dorncheck, have an idea of how much time these kids are spending on their sports teams. They go to away games, it's hours away. So they don't come back until 9 o'clock at night, and then they have AP World and Honors Chem and Algebra 2. Like, the teachers may not be aware sometimes of how much work they have, because they don't know. Like, I always wanted to put like the sport on the kids' schedule. Like, notice Johnny's in soccer and basketball and track. Like, oh wow, that's, then the teacher can say, oh, how is your track meet? Or how, it just, that's another conversation, just an idea I had, but.
Eliminated if ninth
Oh.
graders are
Oh.
in high school and that they wouldn't have to delay their practices or anything like that. I think that would help
It would.
if
Well,
ninth
it
grade
would,
is up
we wouldn't
there.
have to wait. So a lot of the kids are waiting until 3 o'clock for practice
Right,
to
and they're
begin.
waiting around and they have nothing to do. And
yeah.
as far as, I just want to say about extra help, my son goes to extra help. He goes during his lunch period.
Yeah.
Because he can't go after school for whatever reason. He's got,
It's just not always available.
Right,
If the
but he-
teacher's free when they're, and he's free, that's great, yeah.
he'll go to a different teacher. If he
Okay.
can't get his own teacher, sometimes what you have to get what is available to
Yeah.
you. And that's what we told him. If your teacher is not available and you don't have a free period at that time, you will go during lunch because you won't be able to go after school because
Right.
you have sports.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things we've done with my son. But I feel like if ninth grade is in high school, that
would
would
help.
be a little bit more of help.
Ms. Jansen brings
Yes.
up a wonderful point, and if you look at the student survey piece, it's not just the commitments of our students to in-school activities or extracurricular activities, as it really is referred to, but even beyond that, we have students that, that are in dance, or they're in something else, so
Yep,
it's,
they're in the
yeah,
show.
we have the school team, and then we have the club sport or the travel team that they're also involved in. So we had a few years ago when one of our students came to speak at one of the board meetings, and she gave us her day, and we tried to tally up the number of hours. It was 18 hours that she was doing stuff before she went to bed. So we're all sitting, and you do this, and you do this, and you do this. And she was a high academic student, went to a very good college, did very well, but it's, when we say it's a three-village issue, it's not just a three-village issue. My colleagues across the island as superintendents all have this, across the country are all saying the same thing. The arguments that are being discussed here are arguments that are universally being discussed. The value of homework, what are we looking at for start times? What are we looking at for, students and sleep time? Sleep deprivation is a health crisis. It is not just among students, it's among adults as well. But we have an ability to address some of it. Does it mean that some will stay up later? It could be. And we've said repeatedly, Barbara's going to throw something at me, at some of the meetings, that it's got to be a partnership between the school district and the home. If there's not a set bedtime in the house for the children, no matter what their age, and I'm calling them children, even though some of them are bigger than us when they're 18 and growing. My son's taller than me now. You have to have that in place, because otherwise it's for naught. And just because you close the door and you think they're asleep, I don't think they're asleep. They got the cell phone underneath the cover or whatever device. How many kids have TVs in their rooms or computers going on? It's a lot different than, I'm going to age myself here. We had one TV in the house growing up. I didn't have a TV in my bedroom growing up. There was no cell phone devices. The computer was about this big. It sat on a desk in someone's room. It's a lot different today. They can access the entire world on this little device. YouTube, television, everything they want, their friends, text messages, social media, all different hours of the day and night. So the cell phone committee is trying to address a component of that for in-school. What we need to work with is partnerships with the homes in our community to understand that we have a major issue for ourselves to address. So if you're the parent and you're going to bed assuming your child is asleep, or you go to sleep and you don't know whether your child is asleep or not, that's why I was laughing at I appreciate Laura's study. If you look at those yellow charts compared to the green charts, go page by page and see this is what the parent thinks is happening, and then what the kids are thinking is happening. So it's a very interesting way to compare what reality is for, no, my kid's in bed. Are you sure about that? And if they are in bed, what are they doing? And are you aware of what they're doing? As I said, from our standpoint as a district, from the devices we provide them, we can track that there's a lot more going on after the acquired bedtime. So we have an issue. We have a lot of issues, but we have an issue.
Excuse me, I just wanted to ask for a clarification that this alternate that we're talking about with the high school starting at 7:40, it does have a built-in extra curricular /
Right.
extra help at the end of school.
Yeah, it's
right?
about 40 minutes long.
Okay.
But as Jim said, they're not going to be sprinting out of the classroom necessarily.
Okay,
So
but
you
it does
gotta-
have it.
Probably by a half hour you might have it.
Just a question, it can be clarified. The sports, if they don't have games, why the sports cannot start at 3:30 p.m.? If it's just swimming and say they're not going for meets,
I would have to have Mr. Finnerty answer that for you, and I don't want to speak out of turn. Some do start later.
yeah, because I'm assuming the only hard constraint is games. If they have to be there at 4 o'clock, then they have to leave at 3. I understand that.
Right, but there's also requirements for certain sports, for the number of practices and hours of practice they have to have before they're allowed to compete.
But they can start 3:30. I mean, that's.
I understand the time-wise,
Yeah, yeah,
but
so-
that just means if they need to meet an hourly requirement. For instance, football, I can give you that
Yes.
example. They have to have a certain number of hours in for practice even before they can have their first game. If they don't meet those requirements, so starting later, if the kids are trying to make the late buses, may not meet that requirement.
But
So
if everything shifts for half an hour, I assume left bus is gonna shift for half an hour too. So then. we
They
have just
might, that'd
shift it
be
for half
something
an
we
hour.
might
So-
have to take a look at. Right
so-
now, we wouldn't be shifting
So
that.
no, but what I'm thinking is if we shift this half an hour, we shift everything half an hour, and they don't have games every day. I assume they don't have to, so if they want to have help, they will still have enough time for
Right.
extra
3
help.
o'clock, 3 o'clock, as we heard from Mr. Finney, is a pretty hard and fast time that most of the coaches use.
I'm asking why. I mean,
And again,
why
I
is very
can't, I
important.
can't, I would have to give that question to Mr. Finney.
Okay.
And, you know. and
Yeah,
it-
there
basi-
is,
I'm
there
sorry.
is no real, I mean, we have in 2005 and in 2009, the high school started at 7:55 a.m. So that, and the world didn't collapse. And we still have sports, etc. So I'm just,
Split. So, Ms. Conley, can you address that?
I think that was when we were on a 1 to 9 and 2 to 10 split schedule then. But I think a lot of the 3 o'clock start time has to do with the ninth grade coming up, so students in the ninth grade can get to their sports practices to participate based on the shuttle bus. I think, I'm not Mr. Finnerty, I don't want to speak for him, but I think
No, of
that's a part of the rationale for the start for the sports at that
Right,
time.
and the split schedule, part of that necessity for that was space reasons. That was before the science wing was built. And the enrollment was much higher than it is now.
So does this mean potentially, I know you know the answer, if the ninth grade is moved to the high school, then that 3:30 will be much more doable because they will all be in the same building?
Yeah, I have to have Mr. Finney
Okay.
address that. Yeah.
So he seems he is the crucial person
Yes.
for us to continue the conversation.
Absolutely.
I think that, I'm sorry, just to add, that, Mr. Dornacek did make a good point, that whatever we determine here, our students are really given a lot of different offerings after school, whether it's through their co-curricular, theater program, sports, having an opportunity to attend extra help. So whatever we determine, I think we want to be able to maximize our students' abilities to participate in the things that they're interested in and not lose out on trying those things. So I think that's an important thing for all of us to consider because, yes, we want as parents for us to regulate and help kind of manage some of our own children's time and schedules. But for this particular group, as we talk about this, I think it just should be an important factor that when our students make application to college, breathing because this is far away, making application to college and they're putting together their college profile and their transcript, that so much of why our students are so successful when they leave Ward Melville is because of the plethora of offerings that they've had here in this school district. So optimizing that for our kids, I think, should be something that we consider here moving forward.
So I'm going to give a counter view here because I understand that narrative. But the other narrative is that the most important thing the kids learn is in the classroom with the teachers. And that's what's going to be useful when they get to university is what they learn of differential calculus or English and so forth. And that has always got to be the main thing we're focused on. I'm not saying anything else isn't useful or valuable, but the time spent with the teachers is the most valuable thing. And we do have to optimize their ability to absorb what they're being taught. And if they're tired and if they're not ready for school that morning, they're not learning it. And that we're wasting the most important thing that we offer those kids.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that's not true at all. I'm just saying as this committee takes a look at the entirety of the day, that we consider all of these as factors that go into that.
There's always trade-offs, right? But if you're going to say one thing is premier, one thing is most important, it's class time.
health.
Well, we could go with health as well.
I actually, yes, I think we
Also
have to
mental health.
prioritize, and
Health.
health comes first, class comes second, and extracurricular activities, they're extracurricular, I would think they come third. We cannot force people to get up at 5:30 because of extracurricular activities. That's, for me, just blatantly unfair.
I might be changing the subject a bit here, but has the committee looked at?
good.
Yeah. This might be even more controversial, though. Has the committee looked at changing the length of the day and increasing the school year time by a couple of weeks to do that? You know, that'll give it a later start time and more time to do with clubs.
So part of it's an excellent point. So in New York State education law, none of the days prior to September 1st count for the 180 days or the 990 hours or 900 hours in the elementary schools. It's an archaic law that goes back to when we were a farming rural state. So has not changed in 200 and some odd years. It is ridiculous. It needs to change immediately. There are districts, for instance, at Jericho, that do start school earlier, full knowing that those days don't count in the calendar, but they pick up the academics for those days as well, which would mean you would be starting before Labor Day in most cases. The one year I think we started before Labor Day.
Tried to start.
Yes, it was like we were shooting puppies on the front lawn of the schools.
Well, then Hurricane Irene came.
Then Irene came, yes, we had a lovely time with that. So it is a cultural piece. There are districts in the state that, you know, about 20 years ago now, I want to say, I could be off with the date, so don't please quote me on this. The state permitted 20 school districts in the state to start their school year earlier and have 20 additional, there's a lot of 20s in there, 20 additional days. They went from 180 to 200 days. They did a study on it. They found out, amazingly, those students in those districts did better than the year before. Well, no duh, they had 20 extra days of instruction that you could have used. So there are also considerations for when we think about breaks that we have on the downstate area. When I say downstate, anybody north of Long Island is considered upstate according to us, geographically. But you know, some of the people in Westchester County would consider themselves downstaters as well. The February break that exists is a leftover from the Carter administration in the 1970s. It was designed to save fuel. It's remained in the downstate area. It doesn't really exist in the upstate areas because they traditionally blow most of their snow days throughout the year because they, 2 feet of lake effect snow in Buffalo just this past week. So they don't have a February break. We could talk about length of year, but then we have to negotiate with our unions and things like that and add those things on. It is possible. It does add more days, and it would help us fulfill hours. Length of day, like we said, it's a 6-hour, 41-minute day right now. You could certainly extend the day. Those 20 districts that I mentioned earlier, their average length of day was 8 hours. So that was what they set up as their time frame. So with all those considerations, the students did better. Again, they were in school more. So that you would hope that if they're in school more, they're absorbing more, they're getting more instruction. So it really didn't need to take that big study to do that. You probably could have a few people in a room figure that out in about 10 minutes, but they did it and they allowed it. Some of those districts continue to do that. So there are districts that have 185 days and districts that have 183 days. We have 180. And again, we exceed the number of hours right now, not by a lot, by a little. And it gives us enough of a leeway in the event that, Ms. Pimentel can tell you, because she's the CIO and does a lot of our state reporting, that we don't cringe when we start losing snow days if we have a major bad winter or a hurricane or something come along. So that has not really been discussed at this level, but it's something that we've been discussing at different levels with superintendents, and I know the boards have been discussing, the NISBA boards have been discussing with the state, like, please take the handcuffs off us with the September 1st thing. Because other states, if you go down to other parts of the country, they start in states in mid-August with their school year. They also don't end at the end of June like we do. They end earlier. They end typically in May or the first week in June. So there's a set-off to some of that. So
And our school year has to end to coincide with the Regents.
yes, the Regents exams are the block. We have to end then. Even if you're in elementary, you still end when the Regents' last day is set.
So how much time do we have between September 1st and the Regents test, though? Is there wiggle room?
There
with what we have
is
now?
some, yeah, there
Okay.
is some. But again, if we extend the school year, we have to 10 units in this district that we have to negotiate extending the year. And of course, all of them are going to do that for free. So I'm not even going to look at Mr. Pickford. So is that?
I just had a comment and a question. So I am in one of those 6 districts that starts at 7:05. My first class is at 7:05 tomorrow. My first 4 classes are at 7:05 tomorrow.
Great teaching a social studies class that early, isn't it?
AP government too.
Oh.
So, like, I understand the unique challenges of being in a district like this, and we do not have a period after the day for extra help. My athletes go right away to their sport. They go right away to their club. And with my AP students, that's not really an issue. They can get a pass, they come over. It's my regular kids. When they're in season, I don't see them. You know, if they need help, they're not coming. So when you overlap those 2 issues, the sports and the academic help, that's where you're going to see your decline. Your decline's not going to be in your AP classes. It's going to be in the Regents kids who maybe only come to this building to go to their sport. You know, so just be mindful of that. If we decide we're going to start shrinking things, and I am a fan of moving the times, that is a cost, and it's going to be particularly bad probably for our kids who are most vulnerable.
Right.
My other question, though, was do we have a program in the building where athletes during their season get any sort of relief during their gym periods? Is there a way that we could offset that and allow them to do that?
Ms. Connolly, you want to? Yeah, no.
I'm not Mr. Finnerty, but I believe state ed regulation prohibits that.
Fantastic.
Yes.
There are
Why don't we all
private
just get on a bus and drive to Albany? That might solve a lot of these problems.
There are some private schools, like I believe the Knox School, perhaps, maybe, and
Yeah, they're not governed by the same regulations.
Right.
So my kid went to a school where they have a remote day every so often. So, and that's permissible under state regulations. Technically, right now, we could do remote days for snow days. We don't do that in our district, but there are districts that also do that. Sorry, you had a question. Right. Ms. Rosenzweig? Yeah. You can turn on your mic right there, sorry.
Yes, we have one now, and now that the elections are over, we're going to begin our meetings with local legislators and put our agendas together, figure out what our priorities are. So, yes, we're going to try. Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
There's other districts that are actually trying to lead the way here, so.
There's also what's referred to as we have a legislative day on February 3rd. That's typically it's at Longwood High School. So we go there. All the boards go there with all the administrations from our region. Basically, all of Suffolk County go and speak to all of our state legislatures, assemblymen, the state senators that will arrive there too, and they listen. They also provide some feedback sometimes back that you're never going to get this or you're never going to get that. We have to remember in the state the state legislature and the state senate, we are dominated in this state by New York City. So New York City, if New York City doesn't want to change it, they have a block that can force about a 60% majority not to change anything or to change a lot of things. You'd be surprised, having worked in the city system, what they care about. So. Oh, Anthony, yeah.
So I just want to start off by saying, I know I've heard many times that moving the ninth graders to the high school, there's a lot of benefits to that, and some people have thrown that around. But we're still teasing out all the other side conversation, why it might not be a benefit. So if we think moving them is going to create a solution, we have to really have a full conversation before we do that. That's just a statement, because I have, some concerns about that. But talking about tonight, there's a couple of things that come to mind. I'm a student advocate, I'm a guidance counselor, and my job is to make sure that we give our students the best opportunity to be the best that they are. And what I'm hearing tonight is that we're talking about solutions and a lot of generalizations, what would be better. But just like learning styles, when students have different learning styles and they have different, different ways, it's the same thing when we're talking about students who are self-motivated, students that struggle, some students that have athletics as their primary, a lot of students who are utilizing their clubs for their confidence and all that other stuff. I just want to put a big picture together for this conversation, because sleep tolerance, and some students do well in the morning, some students don't do well in the morning, and we, as a building, my building, I can only speak for that, when parents call us and they say that my child struggles with math in the morning, we try to move that thing. We do that, we do what is necessary for a kid for the purpose that we want a student to maximize their ability. We're not cookie cuttering the approach. So I think we should be taking that same approach here. It's not all in one direction, because there are some students, and I had a child here not too long ago who was a morning person and did well in the morning and benefited from the after-school clubs and really built a lot of confidence and self-esteem. So I don't think that we should be looking at it one-all. One of the things that I had suggested a while back, and I don't know if it's possible, but maybe we can do some sort of a staggered schedule that may have compromises that Dr. McKinnon had mentioned, that everything is a compromise, and our students do compromise, and some students will give up maybe the clubs because they would rather, it would benefit them to get up later. So if we could possibly consider a 2 through 10 schedule for some students, a 1 through 9 student for the students, and that other period when we're talking about right now it looks like in the nuts and bolts of what we're saying, we have 35 minutes we're adding, and as Barbara had said, that's not sufficient, right? So if it was a possibility that you could do a compromise or a staggered schedule, you might capture a little bit more time, and knowing that your child is more of a late riser and would benefit, maybe they can capture more time than that 35 minutes. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know if it's a 1 through 9 or a 2 through 10, but you know what? We have students right now that come to the high school.
Right, but their parents drive them.
I understand that. But I'm saying that, like, if we, and I honestly, I didn't look at this because I don't even know how to decipher this, right? So no, look, I was going to ask, one of my first questions was going to be, can you just tell me what, in a summary, what you said? But I think I can probably predict that some students would say, leave it alone, and some students say it would really help me, right? So if that was to come, and if there was the possibility for some students that really did need that extra or the stagger, and they were going to do what they do right now, coming to school, and the transportation was provided by parents. I'm not saying that that is a solution, because what Erin said is very important. Fair and equitable access is the most important thing that we owe our students. But I think that when we're talking about these things, I think that when you look at a student and you're looking at a kid, everybody has differences that maybe we can work with to make it the best experience for them, and that could be something like a staggered schedule. Because when I'm hearing that students would be better coming in later, I get it. I have those students right now in 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade. We have students who say, I'd rather do it in the morning because later on my medication wears out, and I'm tired at the end of the day, and I have science and math, move that up. It's not all in one approach. So if there was a possibility to do something with that, and I know it's maybe a cost in busing, I don't know, but my gut says that if it's really that important, and a kid can make up an hour and it's a staggered, and a parent would say, I'll drive him, I'll get him there, or something like that. I don't think that's fair and equitable, but I think that's something we should consider.
So it's the equity that's the problem, and thank you for those comments, but this has come up a lot of times, that people have workarounds, like, in fact, I can talk for several parents, families here, that they were bringing their kids in a period later, and the kid had to make up for it by not having lunch or so forth, right? The thing is, it's an equity issue, right? If people that have flexible schedules, they tend to be better off in some way or the other, and it's the people without those flexible schedules whose kids are struggling, they don't have that option. It's very hard to justify that, right?
I totally understand that, and I wasn't suggesting that, it should be for the haves and the have-nots. Well, too bad. What I'm saying is that
it inevitably ends up like that because of the buses, right?
Well, maybe we can figure out. But what we're talking about, the opposite way is the same way, though, Dr. McKinnon. The opposite way is that then we do say it's for all, and that some kids don't benefit and some kids do benefit. So, it can go in both directions. I'm just saying.
No, I hear you on the individual differences. Like, I have 3 kids that have very different sleep times, right? For some kids, it's just zero problem to get up at that time, and they like it. There's not a problem, right? We're not harming them by moving the start times back, in my view. We're trying to help the kids that do struggle.
And we should. We should definitely help, because I know a lot of those kids that struggle in the morning.
Right, and we have been very accommodating, and thanks to the guidance department and the administrations of each of the secondary schools in particular as well, that have worked out those schedules for those students to come in later times. It's not just, the guidance department is absolutely the advocates for students, but I'd like to think all of us as administrators and teachers are advocates for kids, not just one area. We're all looking at the best interests. Science teachers do look out for that. Social studies teachers do look out for that. The staggered schedule would be ideal. If it's a busing piece, it's going to be costly. There's going to be a cost to that, and we could certainly start to calculate that out. We have to be careful with students, parents abrogating their child's right to transportation. So you're not allowed to do that. And we are a universal transportation school where we provide transportation for everyone, mostly for a safety factor more than anything else. And with the way our community is configured, we don't have sidewalks and we don't have even curbs in some of our areas. So and when you're going home at 5 o'clock at night and it's this dark out, or getting up at, as you said, 5:30 in the morning and it's this dark out, and you're sitting at a bus stop at 6 o'clock in the morning and it's that dark out, what risks are we taking there? Forget about the sleep for a moment. What risks do we take in those environments? So it's, not saying we should do with daylight savings time. I don't want to get on a soapbox about that. But we need, there's a lot of factors. Staggered schedules work for a lot of our students. Even the 0 periods over the course of years worked for a lot of our students. They came in earlier, finished earlier, were able to go. Absolutely, those things have been. And 3 Village is it's not uncommon. Other districts, I've been in 6 different districts in 2 different states. Other places do the same thing. We're not alone in that care or that concern for our students. Other places do similar things to that in their respective communities to try to help accommodate that. The factor is cost.
Well, just that busing thing, that should be something that we should consider, even though
Sure.
it's costing us more money, if it really is best for our students, and we do have that staggered approach, and
Absolutely.
we're putting money where it belongs, I think that would be very valuable to look at, because we're talking about what benefits students, and if it is a cost that we have to absorb, but it's really meant to give a kid another extra hour, an extra 15 minutes, and they're willing to trade that off
I agree
because
with you.
they're not the club and stuff, then maybe that should be a consideration.
I absolutely agree with you. You can write that date down that I actually agreed with you, Anthony.
Right.
But we also,
So,
staggered
no.
scheduling is great, but we also need to think of the kids that staggered scheduling does not work for. So you have kids that go to BOCES, they have to leave at a certain time, so they have to take those classes in the morning. You can't stagger their classes. You have kids that are in self-contained classes. There's one class for that child. So you cannot change that class because Johnny wants it 4th period and Jenny wants it 2nd period. There's one class. So, and there's lots of classes, I believe, in the high school and probably the other secondaries that are the same. They're simultaneous classes. So it's very hard to say we want to stagger classes for kids, but only for some kids because most of them take simultaneous classes. So I just think that that's a difficult thing to.
I hear you out.
It is difficult, but I think Anthony's point is well taken. And in the past, we have done that. Having taught, when I first arrived here in 1996, I taught PM school. We actually had a school that ran from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock. And we transported kids, about 40 of them. That was about as large as we ever got at that time, during that time period. But it worked in those student schedules that got those kids to the schools. We've been very lucky with the way the academy is structured. It kind of mirrors almost the junior high school schedule, sort of in between the junior high school schedule and the high school schedule. And for a lot of the students, that also works for them. So that setting, that's an example of what Anthony is referring to. We built a program that accommodated some of our neediest students, that the first group of kids that we had come through here, the first 13 kids, many of them were school phobic and had never stepped foot in any one of our buildings in their entire educational experience, and they were now at the high school level. We built a program that got them, and what that program has done is it's managed to increase our graduation rates every year by about 2%, because those would have been our non-grads. Those would have been kids that would not have come to school because of not being able to get up at that particular time or be able to get out at that time. They may have had work schedules. Those kids in the PM school years ago that we used to have 3 to 5, they worked during the day. And so the concept of our district changing demographically is not new. We've always been had a very large dichotomy of wealth and abilities in different programs. 3 Village has prided itself, and we should continue to pride ourselves and make it a priority, that we try to provide as much accommodation as possible, but that accommodation is costly. So when we look at our per student cost, how much we spend, which may be higher than some other places, it's because we offer so many of these specialized programs, and that's what makes us unique. And that's where, the idea when we look at this time, it's not eliminating extra help or a club time. It's shortening the time period of that. having been the moderator of the speech and debate club here at the high school and having been a coach in the high school, can tell you that, yeah, those club meetings lasted 20 minutes. Sometimes those club meetings lasted 5 minutes. Sometimes those club meetings lasted 2 hours. It all depended on what was coming up. So there are some clubs that meet once a month, some clubs that meet once a week, some clubs that meet once every other week. It depends on what the students are interested in. We offer a lot of clubs. Ms. Zeidman, how many clubs are we up to right now in the high school? Around 40-ish?
I think it's 42.
42.
I think, don't quote me.
Yeah, so that's a lot of offerings for a school our size. We have 1,425 students in the high school. So that's a lot of offerings for kids. So we do meet a very diverse amount of needs. The same is true in the junior high schools. We offer a lot of clubs, a lot of activities, a lot of opportunities. You go by right now to the high school at this time of night, the play's coming up in another week, you're going to see kids there. They're going to be still practicing. Linda Contino's going to be out there, Mr. Rogers, all of them. They're going to be singing and dancing, doing all the, it's guys and dolls, so get your tickets fast. That was a shameless plug for the play, so everyone online, you're going to make sure you're listening to that. We offer a lot of things. It is not uncommon to find kids that are captains of teams or high, scholar athletes going off, and they're in a play or they're in a club. So that's what does make us very, very unique. That those opportunities. It's great when I saw one year a Regeneron scholar in the school gets high-fived by the captain of the football team. Like, great job, and she in turns high-fiving when we won the county championship. That's the type of community we built here, and that's what we want to have continue. So what we're focusing on in this committee, try to reground this a little bit more again on this, is do we have an issue with the current start time? Is 7:05 too early? Does 7:40 suffice to help offset that? Can there be a way? I hear Anthony very directly, and many others in the room. Are there other factors that we need to work in there? Yes. Should we look at this when we bring this to the governing committee next week? Do we wait another year? As Mr. Carlson said, we can say, yeah, wait another year. These numbers, no, I'm just saying, you got to hear it, folks. Look at those numbers. If you wait another year, that 963 could be 1.2 million in another year, because we don't know what that CPI is going to wind up being. It could be higher. It could drive it up. We have no way of knowing. Should we get started with something? Should we do something?
Yes.
Barbara's going to throw stuff at me because she's.
I'm not throwing anything.
But
I don't have enough energy after 4 years of throwing it.
But yes, this has been a long journey. This conversation began before COVID. This started in 2019. This isn't that we started this in October.
Years ago, actually.
Yes.
2009, 10, 9?
I wasn't here then. So I can only speak to the 19. Now on that committee. Well, that was the only start time committee in the history of education that started a start time committee and went earlier. That has never been done before. I've worked in a lot of places. I can tell you, no one has ever gone earlier than we were.
Yeah, I have
that
to
was
say,
the only committee that ever
this
did.
issue brought the community together. I got to know these friends because of this issue.
But just speaking about there are early risers and late risers. If you look weekend, only 3% gets before 7 a.m. and 72 gets after 9 a.m. So don't tell me they're early risers because they would get up early on the weekend as well.
Everybody trying to
3%,
catch up.
3%.
Yeah, everybody trying to catch up sleep during the weekend.
No, but if they're early risers,
I know
no, they
cannot
wouldn't be
get
catching up. Because
I know.
as a kid, I was early riser. I
Because
was
that
always
lack of
getting about
sleep.
6:30, whether it's
I
weekend or
know.
not.
Yeah.
But that tells
Kids
me
are really.
there are no early risers here.
That is what I see. I see
It's
all my
basically-
friends, like kids, they
Yeah.
really lack sleep. They're so
Yes.
sleepy during the
Yes.
days. They're trying to distract themselves to go to different activities. So let's get them, more sleep. And I really feel this is a really emergent kind of issue. We don't want to wait, for too long time. I understand that we have offered so much, in the district, but we want the most them to be healthy, to be happy. And they are energetic to do all these kind of things. I mean, as an adult, we know that when we have energy, when we sleep well, we can do so many things. We feel so happy to do all this. We're not dragging ourselves to do things. We're not like trying so hard, feel so bad about ourselves every day. I mean, from day to day, I feel this the way all the time. Since my first child, now he's in the college now. So I just feel like, yeah, it's so important for us to get back the sleep. Now I have daughter who is now in the 10th grade, and she is telling me every day, "I'm so sleepy, Mom. I hate school. That's literally what she said to me, like almost every day. So I feel so bad. It's not just because so many things she has to cope with. I understand as an adolescent, but I want her to be happy to going to school. At least she can have some energy, like in the morning, saying like, Mom, I'm happy. I want to go to school. I want to jump out of the bed. But I feel like, no, she's not that kind of mood. So I just feel like no matter how hard she works for her everyday's work, and also she's doing her, she's a very serious kid, like with all the stuff she's getting involved. But the more we offer them, the more she wants to do, the harder, like energy. She doesn't have that much time and energy and capability. I mean, it's against our original willingness, right? We want them to feel happy, want them to achieve more. But if there are so many choices for them, not necessarily they feel that way. I feel that struggle. But in the morning, definitely I feel like we want to give them like even like 20 minutes, 40 minutes, more, that will help. I really feel like every day. I really think so. So I got involved in this like a couple of years ago with Barbara and everybody. I know my friends here.
4 years.
4 years, yeah.
And a half.
I'm trying my best to, advocate on this. I don't feel like the more we wait, I don't feel like, there's always, problems. There are always issues. We cannot fail,
Oh, believe
like
me, I know
everybody.
that. We got
satisfied.
lots of issues.
I know we have lots of issues, and but this cannot wait. I don't think we want to wait. I mean, I just from my, the gut feeling. I mean, I don't, I look at the data as well, but meanwhile, I feel like this is really something that we want to.
And believe me, the presentation it was showing is not to dissuade anyone. It's just there's a reality to this that comes down to money. So, and that's a factor. If the community supports the idea of this, then okay, then we move forward. But we need to be based in reality that, as Mr. Carlson pointed out, we are in a different era than we were 25 years ago. A tax cap era does not allow us the latitude where we could do a 14% tax increase to the community and say, yay, everyone's going to vote for this. Absolutely not. Most districts are not going to vote in tax cap blowouts like that. Just not going to happen. So, if we can prove the need for some of that, yes, maybe. But if these things, there's a give and take. If we do this, then something else has to come out. What is that something else? Are there other things we may need to do? And that's where Mr. Carlson made a very good point. That's where we have the BAC. That's where, this type of information we bring to their attention and say, this is some of the things we're looking at. We need your advice. We need your ability. The board needs your input about what things could we take a look at that may save us money or may produce revenue or may be able to allow us some latitude. And there's a lot of opportunities that we haven't considered yet. And there are potential things that we could do that could save money or potentially gain revenue in the long run. This endeavor began over a year ago because we need to take a hard and fast look at where we are at this point in time. If we don't re-examine what our direction is and what we're doing a wonderful job. Absolutely. No one can discount the academics, what our children are getting as far as experience in the school, but we want that experience to remain. And we want that experience in the tax cap era. If we don't start looking at what those expenses are going to be and how we're going to handle them, if we just continue to ignore it and say it'll just go away, it's going to hurt us at some point in time badly. So we just need to address what that might be. This was added into the whole grand scheme of things because there are monetary factors that go along with changing the start time. It's not something that we snap our fingers and we can do tomorrow. There are monetary factors to that. And if the community values that, and we're talking about the whole community, not just the parents and the students, but also our teachers and our administrators, our staff, everyone together. We're all in this together. I hate to sound like a cliche musical, so to work towards a common goal. Yes, I take a great deal of respect for Mr. Dornicek. He's one of our best science teachers in the district. I would say that if he wasn't even sitting in the room right now. He has a finger on the pulse of what he sees in that school over the 20 years that he's been working there or more. How many years now, Jim? 25. God bless you. So, Now, so that's important. I take seriously when Anthony Polaro says we have kids that have needs that we need to Totero, sorry, I'm calling you Polaro. Totero, you're about 2 feet tall. So when you look at things from his guidance perspective about what he sees with kids, he counsels kids every single day. When Leah Jansen's sitting with kids in after-school activities and sports and counseling during the day as well, and when they're coming to their offices, we have a lot of kids going through a lot of social emotional stresses right now. We have a lot of families that are going through a lot of social emotional stresses right now. So we need to be just aware, cognizant of what any change, whatever it might be, whether it's 9th grade moving or 6th grade moving or the start time changing or anything else we might consider, what impact that's going to have. And if our greatest interest is in what's in the best interest of kids, then that's what should motivate us. So this, if anyone could sit in this room and honestly say that, there's kids getting plenty of sleep. You can't. You just can't. I'm sorry. No one can sit in this room and say that. There's enough of our own studies from what we see here and what we see out in the rest of the world. Kids are lacking sleep. There's a major health crisis. Forget about COVID. Forget about flu. Forget about everything else. We have a sleep deprivation crisis. So, and it's affecting everyone. It's affecting me as an adult, too. I fell asleep at a stoplight today. So, it goes to show you, we're all lacking a lot of sleep. So we need to make sure we're addressing those health issues. Listen, when legalization of marijuana came along, just so everyone knows, you can't smoke marijuana on school property. We had to send out a message, imagine this, a message to the parental community that you can't have a tailgating party where you smoke pot and drink alcohol on school grounds. I've never in the 33 years I've worked in this profession have had to do that. That's what we had to do this year because it was going on. That was considered socially acceptable to do it in front of your kids. And then you wonder why, when we did the study that Ms. Connolly presented a few weeks ago, why we see 12-year-olds experimenting with drugs and alcohol at the start in this community. And we're not alone in that. That's a national trend that's going on, where we're seeing teen pregnancy beginning earlier and earlier and earlier. And if you think we're immune to any of this stuff in Three Village, I will tell you, you're very sadly mistaken. We have all of these issues and then some in this community. And we have kindergartners expressing suicidal ideation. We have a major mental health crisis in our communities. That's a problem, folks, and we need to keep that as our central focus of how we keep addressing that. So that was my soapbox. You had your hand up in the back. Yes. Not for next year. No, we need more, as Mr. Totero said, not Mr. Villa, said, we have our internal review committees looking at that next week. Then it's going to the governing committee as well, and then it's going to the board on the 13th. So if both go through, you may be paying the 1.3 just for 1 year. Yeah. Yeah, and then it's in the budget every year after that. Could, yeah. If enrollment.
It can help to offset the other costs.
It will help offset, yes. The 9th will offset some of the other costs.
Then there is incentive to move 9th grade.
There is, in that regard, but there is other pieces as.
And there's some disincentives too.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. There's disincentives with a lot of things in life, I gotta tell you.
And obviously, I'm in full support of moving forward and next year. But I think also in practical reasons is that we, if the moving grades are going to go through, that's a big change too. So perhaps separate the two changes, not everything in one time. It helps the whole, school community to kind of adapt to
Yes.
one piece at a time.
Right. So can we just, and again, this is not a vote, maybe just a show of hands. Just looking at this for a moment, just by show of hands, you in the room, who would support this change?
Versus no change.
Well, this is the least bad.
The least worst. The
Next
least of the
year,
worst.
for next year,
Yes.
Dr.
Next year.
Scanlon.
Okay. And who would be not in favor of a change that is proposed here? Okay. All right, so we will bring this forward to the governing committee next week, have them analyze it. Internal review will also get this before that happens. Their meeting's on Tuesday and, as well. So it's Tuesday for the internal review, and that's administrators and teachers within the district. Thursday, which I'm sorry to say, that's also the first day of Hanukkah. I apologize that when we looked at the calendar, we didn't realize that was the first night of Hanukkah. So it's also December 7th, which maybe there's some foreboding with that as well. I'm not sure about that one, too. So
Can I say one thing? When we said that vote, like if you're for it or you're not for it, there's also, for me, it would be, I think we can do better, a little bit better, if we had that flexibility for all students. And Ms. Ruffley, I did not at all mean that any student should compromise. They should get exactly what they want. So I don't believe, when I talked about the schedule, I meant the schedule has to be altered and really looked at for not to have singleton so kid misses out, because that's not acceptable at all. 100% that's not acceptable. But the other piece is, and I hear everyone's voice, every student, you know, is sleep deprived, but there are some students that would benefit and some students that won't, and we should look at that for every student, because that's what we're here for, not just one or the other.
And what we'll try to do is, using your point, Anthony, is maybe take a look at what a staggered schedule for busing might look like. Because obviously, we don't have a lot of kids that have those staggered schedules. How much would that add to our budget if we had to make a few buses available? Yeah.
Dr. Scanlon, I'm sorry,
Yes.
not to be ungrateful or troublemaker, but I would like an acknowledgement that this is not an ideal situation,
Agreed.
and that maybe if with the restructuring we can, do something
Else.
Yeah, more
down the
to
line.
bring us more towards healthier.
Right after I
start
retire in
times.
2026, you can do whatever you want.
I'm not running for superintendent, don't worry.
Dr. Scanlon, could I just ask that staggered schedule thing, could we make sure we talk about that at the governing committee?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have about a week and a half till we have that. I would like to try to get it ready for the Tuesday meeting so that the administrators and teachers could at least take a look at that, what that potential cost could be too, and then we'll bring it to the governing committee.
Can we also get some answers from Mr. Finley about?
Yes,
about
and we'll get the,
3 p.m. and
yes.
I think that's important.
He's probably looking on at home right now, or, after he's been finished with this stuff, saying, oh my God, I wish I was there. So we'll definitely talk to Mr. Finnerty.
So it's an unpopular way to frame this, but one of our goals here, or one of what I feel should be our goal, is to make sure that our kids have a competitive advantage relative to less well-run school districts, right? Nobody ever wants to frame it that way, and I'm not going to even begin to attempt to defend the current Long Island school system. But given how it does actually work, we do have to have an obligation to make sure that our kids are competitive. One of the very few things you can do to make the kids more competitive is to ensure that they get enough sleep and that they're competitive with districts that are better run and that are getting earlier start times, right?
I take exemption to the better run piece.
Right, better run just on that particular
Now
issue.
you're on the board, Dr. McKinnon. You're part of the running.
I understand that. I feel guilty to some.
So I'd be careful with the terminology.
But that is something that we are actually obligated to do, right?
Agreed.
I understand everybody's point of view from health and all these other things. I understand all of them, and I'm sympathetic. But at base, we have to educate the kids, and we have to give them the best possible chance to get educated.
And I think that's a good note to end the meeting on. Thank you
Sure.
very much.